Orania is becoming the new boogeyman in South African politics. The town, which is a privately owned Afrikaners only area, has been the subject of backlash from radical parties like the EFF. Why a small town of only 3,000 people is in any way significant to the lives of tens of millions of people across South Africa is anyone's guess, but the opposition against this is neither surprising nor new. In a country where songs like Kill the Boer and land confiscation against white farmers are the norm, an Afrikaner-only town seems like a slap in the face of established societal norms, basically an act of rebellion from a minority that is expected to apologize for its very existence, apologize for a past that many of them were not even born to witness, a minority that is blamed for all the ills of the country regardless of how little control they have over it, and this is why a presence of such a town will always be viewed with such contempt and resentment. The Economic Freedom Fighters, or EFF, have become some of Orania's loudest political critics, regularly staging marches and promising legal challenges to the town's existence. In the Northern Cape, the party has organized protests to the provincial premier's office demanding the total eradication of Orania, arguing that de facto white enclave undermines South Africa's non-racial constitutional order and the idea of the Rainbow Nation. EFF leaders describe Orania and similar settlements as a grave danger to their democracy, claiming that they entrench racial exclusion and symbolically preserve apartheid-era privilege. Interestingly though, these EFF members do not believe their race-based employment laws or land confiscation against white farmers is a threat to democracy or these ideals. In fact, any discriminatory policy against Afrikaners is viewed as not only positive, but necessary. So far, however, the courts have not agreed with the EFF. Orania secured agreements and favorable rulings that effectively recognize its right to exist as a self-determining Afrikaner community, relying in part on Section 235 of the South African Constitution. This provision protects group self-determination. A High Court judgment in the year 2000 confirmed that the town's private Afrikaans cultural character was not in and of itself unconstitutional, as long as there was no state-enforced racial discrimination. Sadly, this did not deter groups like the EFF and keeps Orania at the center of an ongoing clash between constitutional rights to cultural autonomy and demands for more radical action against white landowners in South Africa. Now, with all this in mind, it's important to understand what Orania is. Orania is a small, privately owned town in the Orange River in South Africa's Northern Cape. Founded in 1991 as an Afrikaner-only community, its founders, led by Karl Boshoff, bought a derelict farmer construction camp and repurposed it as the nucleus of a proposed Volksstaat, a self-governing homeland where Afrikaners could preserve their language, religion, and culture. This was seen as important at a time where people were pushing for a mixed society devoid of any homogeneous culture. From the outset, Orania's rules made it highly exclusive. To live there, applicants must be Afrikaners, speak Afrikaans, have a clean criminal record, and endorse the community's goals. All work, from farm labor to management, is supposed to be done by Afrikaners themselves, part of a philosophy of self-reliance. Residents stress that they reject using black labor and say they simply want control over their own community, economy, and security. The town runs many of its services, has local money, and has invested heavily in agriculture, solar power, and infrastructure as a way of being as independent as possible from the South African state. To many leftists who want whites to atone for apartheid, Orania functions as a middle finger to the notion entirely. It is a de facto whites-only enclave in a country whose post-1994 constitution is explicitly non-racial. Many often describe it as an attempt to revive apartheid in a miniature form, or a little white ethno-state inside a democratic South Africa. Its origins are also tied to one of the last forced removals of apartheid. In 1991, around 64 black and colored families living in the area were relocated over 100 kilometers away to make a way for the new Afrikaner project. It is important to note, though, that these families were provided with compensation in the form of new homes by the state. This is in contrast to the confiscation without compensation that is done against white farmers. Despite this, however, this is something that still fuels anger and accusations of racial injustice. Orania's quality of life is just as much of a contrast to South Africa's society as is its identity. In a country where violent crime is out of control with over 70 murders a day, Orania is basically crime-free. The services run properly and you don't have piles of trash and litter on the streets. Corruption is virtually non-existent and the economy is thriving. All major contrasts to the current state of South Africa. If such a society continues to grow and flourish, it'll act as an indictment on the ruling ANC party. A party that has taken over a country with properly running infrastructure that was safe and stable and turned it into a crumbling war zone over the course of 30 years. And on a symbolic level, Orania clashes with what the ANC promised: the idea of a rainbow nation, the ideal of a mixed integrated society championed by Nelson Mandela. For many like the EFF, the town is a reminder that some whites chose separation rather than this new South Africa. Many refuse to connect this separation, however, to the current conditions of the country, including the crime I just mentioned earlier. This would require them to be critical of their own policies, which, quite frankly, they have no desire to do. Nevertheless, international media sides with the EFF and frequently portrays Orania as a backward, intolerant, and racist society, and South African politicians and activists periodically call for it to be shut down or reintegrated forcefully. At the end of the day, the fundamental issue in all of these is that the critics of Orania, including the EFF, want Orania's prosperity without its style of governance, or without the people who run it. EFF members have no desire in Afrikaners being allowed to hold positions and do jobs they are qualified for. They wish to reduce the white presence in South Africa's governance and workforce. They want to confiscate Afrikaner farms. Yet, despite all of this, they claim they want to help Black South Africans to have the prosperity that Oranians have. But they plan to do this by excluding the type of officials, workers, and businessmen that created the prosperity Orania has. These EFF members have also no desire in creating their own Orania-style communities to prove any of their Marxist policies work. Nor do they have any desire to explain why Orania's presence impedes their ability to bring prosperity to the millions of poor Black South Africans they claim to represent. But despite all of this, Orania will continue to always be controversial, because in the land of misery, crime, and corruption, such a town will always be viewed with such contempt. Anyways, thanks for listening to this video, and if you enjoyed this, make sure to click like and subscribe. See you in the next one.